Welcome to the last panel discussion of the day, of today, and the topic is vulnerable populations. Together in the studio, in the Zoom right now with me, we have some pretty cool speakers working on with different vulnerable groups. We have Gemma May, we have Tambo Joshwa, we have Marco Muccini, Brian Oyewole, and Eero Janson. And we have your names right here in the display as well. But what I would really like, perhaps to begin, and for the audience to get to know you a little bit better as well, is just to say a few words about yourself, and then what are you currently doing? What is it, or how is it that you're helping the vulnerable groups? So Gemma May, ladies first.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. So yeah, my name is Gemma. I'm based in Nairobi in Kenya. I have been working in the NGO world for over a decade now and worked with refugees and young people. My current role is within InHive. We work with networks, so networks that support young people. That can be alumni networks or networks for change. So for instance, agriculture, employability. And I'm also a voluntary member of Techfugees Kenya. So we use technology for refugees.
Very nice to meet you. Then we have Tambo, Joshwa. I'm just going to go by the pictures that you have here. Tambo, where are you from and what are you currently doing?
Right. Thank you so much. Joshua Tambo from Kenya. I am the co-founder of Kshoes, which is a footwear brand that, leverage on partnership with skilled artisans from the informal settlements in Nairobi and Kisumu. We produce fashionable and quality shoes, and then we sell them locally. We also ship some in small bunches to West Africa and partly to Europe and into the US market. And then we reinvest 50% of our revenues in building a pipeline of social enterprises run by women with disabilities living in the informal settlements. Currently, I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya.
Oh, so in Nairobi, Kenya. Marco Muccini, Techfugees, Berlin.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Marco. I'm Italian. I'm unfortunately in Berlin, where it's snowing at the moment. I run the Techfugees chapter for Germany here in Berlin, and we do use tech to help refugees, and we empower refugees to access technology. So it's I would say, is a virtual cycle. I am also running an ethical bank in frontier markets, mainly Sub-Saharan Africa, where we do offer financial inclusion tools to people who are currently excluded from traditional financial services and systems, mainly in rural areas.
Thank you. Then we have Brian. Brian, you're also Techfugees, but in Nigeria.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. It's good to be here. My name is Brian Oyewole. I am from Nigeria. I'm based in Abuja. I am a project manager with a robotics company here in Abuja. It's called Calibotics, and I'm co-lead Techfugees Nigeria. We try to empower displaced us from within the camp. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. And Eero, you're last.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Eero Janson. I'm the director of Estonian Refugee Council. We are a humanitarian organization currently operational in Ukraine, Georgia, Jordan, Lebanon, and recently we started also in Kenya. So this is what my experience is about. So we mostly help refugees and other displaced people also in Estonia. And looking forward to the discussion today.
So without even realizing, I just realized now that we have like a very refugee-centric panel chosen, but we're going to talk about it, the vulnerability more in a wider meaning as well. And actually the first question that I would like to ask all of you, and how I would like it to go, and I know it's sometimes complicated in Zoom and it gets awkward in these Zoom conversations or in these panels, like you never know when you speak. But when you just want to interrupt or interfere, just feel free to raise the hand, and then chip in or chime in with your own experience or thoughts as well. So let's try to keep it more as an organic conversation. But the first thing, like we also talked when we were talking with you previously in the briefings, we talked about the concept in general. So the first question, I guess, from my behalf, just to open up the topic a little bit wider, is what is vulnerability and what does that mean to you? And also perhaps touch upon the topic that how it can affect the others, how everyone can be vulnerable at certain times in their lives. Let's start with Marko. I remember that you didn't really, I don't remember if you didn't like the term refugees or if you didn't like the term vulnerability, but go ahead. What does it mean to you?
Thank you very much. Well, it's not that I don't like the term vulnerability. It's just that it's a little bit too broad to actually carry a specific value, in my personal opinion. I mean, if you look from an etymology standpoint, it's just the ability to be harmed, which is quite broad, and it's quite well distributed across geographies, social tiers, and economical tiers. So I would say that if you want to capture the current trends or the areas of intervention, I would just focus more on the achievability of goals that can empower people in any specific regards. It can be elders who need to access services, goods, and are prevented from doing so because of architectural barriers. It could be people who want to upskill their careers, but are prevented because of, I don't know, social stigma or high tuition costs. It could be people who want to build a family and a life, but instead have to flee their countries because their countries do not want them or put them in danger instead of protecting them. So I would say that I'm very happy with vulnerability as a concept. I would like to see attached to it, I would say, a scale, right? Because I can be harmed, but it won't hurt that much. I'm protected. I live in a very developed country where everyone is, catering to me tools to make my life easy. So I would say that my vulnerability is probably below 1 on a 1 to 10 scale. If you think of a refugee stuck in a camp in transit in between a former life he had to abandon and a new one that he doesn't know how it's going to look like, well, I would say that probably that degree will be in the ballpark of 10.
All right. Eero, do you want to add up to it? Or do you want to add on? Or actually, yes. I'm sorry, Gemma raised the hand first. Ladies first again.
Okay, Gemma, yes. Go ahead.
Gemma, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I would love to build on what Marko just said there. I think certainly in InHive, when we think about the people that we're working with, we look at opportunity. And I think vulnerability is related to that, in that some people have less opportunity, which makes you more vulnerable. So it could be opportunity to education. It could be opportunity to access the job market. mentors, somebody to mentor you, especially if you are an entrepreneur, access, as you mentioned before, to markets, to loans. And I think that vulnerability can affect everyone at some point. And so that's why I think it is important to focus on these subsets, because getting everybody to have that equal opportunity, and that's all they're asking for, right? They're asking for that equal opportunity. Then you empower people. And that really is as simple as that.
Thank you. Eero.
Yeah, just to add on what was already said, for me, it's, being from the humanitarian sector, it's also a bit of a technical term which is thrown around a lot, and sometimes people mean different things behind it. So I do agree with Marco. But for me, it's about two things. It's somehow about exposure to some sort of risks, be it socioeconomic risks or risk of conflict, being displaced in a near future, for example, or losing a job. And the second part is the inability to cope. So if people are resilient, they are able to kind of bounce back very quickly. And we don't really even have to talk only about individuals, but also, we can talk about vulnerable countries or regions in a broader term. But when it comes to individuals, then yes, it's about kind of the ability to bounce back. And then what we need to kind of build or make stronger is this kind of resilience that you are able to bounce back when something hits you. And I do agree strongly with Marco that it's a matter of degree. It's not that I'm vulnerable and you're not. It's something that can change over time. It's you are vulnerable to certain risks and resilient towards other risks, etc., etc. So it's very multifaceted, but I think still useful concept if used correctly.
So yeah, it can change in time. It can change like in a scale that there's no really good way to explain it, or we could just talk about it for ages, like for the whole panel and beyond that. But why is it that you think, because you are all active in the organizations that try to help the vulnerable groups in that way or the other, so why do you even, not from your personal perspective necessarily, but why do you think it's important for the society to understand and to notice the people who are perhaps less fortunate for whatever reason? Who wants to perhaps take that? So why is it, Marco, go ahead.
Well, I'll keep it short. It's if you look at from, let's say, government and society standpoint, I believe it's a matter of opportunity. Because as Eero was saying, it's a matter of building resilience, right? And if you are able to act on specific pockets of society and turn those individuals in people who have, let's say, more skills, more access to opportunities, and more resilience, you are building up a better society, which turns into better economical value, higher quality of living, better healthcare, and so on and so forth. So I would just put it in a nutshell like this.
So building up a better society, right? Go ahead,
Exactly.
Brian.
Okay, what I have to say about that, I think that, like, for me, for example, like far back as when I was a kid, I was disturbed about seeing like really aged people on the road, maybe trying to fill up some potholes with sand so that they could just get a handout from passerby. And then growing up and realizing that the refugees, possibly displaced people all over the place. It's important for society, government, individuals, everybody, all hands must be on deck, because if these people are not sorted, or if they don't get to the point where they feel some level of security, everybody's going to pay for it. You know, we've seen a little bit of that in Nigeria with the Boko Haram, because some of the displaced people who are here, even in Abuja, they were displaced from their communities by people who they see as their brothers or part of them. But because of the situation of things, some of them turned against every other person, including government and the entire country. So yes, it's very important for societies, government, individuals, everybody to do anything at all that they can to help these people. Thank you.
Thank you. My personal approach is like much more simple and basic, but I do believe like if you do good, then the good returns you at one point when you need it. So yeah, Eero.
Yeah, just very shortly that you know, I know it's a cliche, but the society, I think, is as strong as its weakest link. So that if we kind of help those who are somehow vulnerable in any kind of situation or society, then you know the society itself will be stronger. So yeah,
That's true. So let's move on, like now to a little bit more practical matters. You all work in the sector of trying to empower the vulnerable groups in different way. Some through technology, some through other like practical approaches, some like with a very hands-on approach. Because this conference or this program itself is because we're doing it online first. And it's a hackathon that's happening online. We don't really have a good way of controlling the progress of the hackathon teams or what they're doing any other way than having them to build a clickable prototype. So in a way, we are looking for tech solutions through this hackathon. How do you think that technology can help to empower the vulnerable groups or boost them? And what do you see as threats? Go ahead. Tambo?
Right. I'm a strong believer that technology is a powerful tool that can act as an enabler in creating inclusive, but also in addressing the inequalities, especially in regards to vulnerable populations. Maybe say, for example, people's around PWDs, they struggle around, you know, with inclusions at workplaces. Sometimes they struggle with, you know, just physical barriers, communication barriers, and, you know, the attitude towards, you know, people perceptions towards them. And we can build a framework, leverage technology to build framework that would enhance their communication effectively and support them to really be integrated in the, you know, the wide spectrum of maybe the community or the platforms, the development platforms. When you look at perhaps children, maybe living in the informal settlements, more often they have malnutrition problems and lots of diseases. And you see technology can, you know, come in and play a very critical role in, you know, providing options of telehealth options that would maybe help parents to diagnose maybe issues around their children. So in a nutshell, I am a strong believer that in this era, it is inevitable to leave behind vulnerable population, especially in the digital space.
Thank you. Thank you, Tambo. Gemma, you have your hand raised up.
Yeah, for me, I'm very passionate about this, is education. Working with refugees and youth who don't have the opportunities that other people have. I think education and technology have a great role to play. Getting it right, I think, is one of the big issues. I mean, with refugees, for instance, less than 3% of aid money goes to refugee education, and less than 1% of that goes to higher education. So if we are expecting these people to integrate into society and be empowered, how can they do that when they don't have access to those tools? So I think education and technology go very much hand in hand.
Thank you. I believe in it as well. Eero?
I think Brian was before.
Brian. Yes, Brian, I'm sorry. Brian, speak a little bit up. Your mic is a little bit hard to hear. Speak a bit louder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it good now? Is it better?
Yeah, just loud voice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So the thing for me about technology, I mean, if you look back at all the industrial revolutions that we've had before technology, those people who are able to learn more about them and make use of them are the ones who are leading now. Now, in the case of technology, it is more accessible than any other of those revolutions, because of the internet. Now, when you look at the situation in Nigeria is quite peculiar because a lot of these forcibly displaced people, they don't even have basic education. It's difficult to communicate first in English. Secondly, if you're talking about devices, you're going too far. You get what I mean? So some of them who are lucky to find their ways to places like Abuja here. Abuja is the capital of Nigeria. Most of such people have, let's say, have access to the internet, for example, but they don't even know. So that takes me back to the point that was raised earlier about education. So there's the thing about access to these technologies, and then followed by education. It needs to be more accessible, and then there needs to be more enlightenment. I'm talking from the Nigerian situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm completely I completely agree with you there. Like technology alone doesn't do anything. You have to have certain structures on point before you can even start to tackle it through this way. All the infrastructure, access to the education and stuff like that, it goes hand in hand. Eero?
Yeah, just to echo on the same issues that, for me also digital solutions, they are not solutions in themselves somehow. They are useful when they address real needs. So I think there are multiple kind of there's a checklist to go to which needs to be gone through before you even start developing something for any kind of vulnerable group. So first of all, is it addressing actual need? Do users need it? Does it make their lives somehow better? Then secondly, do they, if you make it, there's actual need and you start developing something, can they actually have access to it? So do they have a proper device or access to internet to actually be able to use it? And third, also whether they have necessary skills and mental capabilities to use it. Not meaning the mental capabilities in a bad way, but I mean I've seen or heard about apps being developed for stroke patients who are just unable to use them because they are not able to use the device which is being given to them. So I think there's, over these past 10 years, so many technological advances being made and also then so many apps being developed, and not all of them have gone through this checklist of actually, identifying whether what we are making and investing money in is worth it at the end. So I think we need to use more this kind of service design methods and thinking in order to actually starting developing anything, especially when it comes to vulnerable populations.
I do agree. I think it's like, it's especially true, like we keep on saying it throughout the hackathon, understand your audience first, but it's especially true when it comes to this particular audience. Marko, you work on many, many fronts and you definitely have lots of opinions and a lot to say on that.
No, I definitely echo and second everything that has been said. I think there is probably not much to add. My personal 2 cents would be on top of technology being a medium, disruptive, affordable, scalable, and empowering, so to speak, but also just a medium. I would say that it opens a channel that works in both ways, right? So you can have top-down delivery of best practices, which are unavailable in the geography where the user can access it, which is very good, but can also trigger grassroots adoption of technology or grassroots design thinking, as Eero was saying. There are several examples of very costly use of technology, which was taught for an audience that doesn't exist or around a need that was addressed in a poor manner, right? So, but then what I wanted to add is that I believe that what
or not
many
so cool examples, but something, I don't know, something.
Well, probably most of the things that we cannot remember the name of were built, money was burnt just to build those things that were never adopted or were not addressed, addressing the right needs, or the need was not captured by the user experience, so people didn't understand what the app was for. Like a stroke or an app to prevent strokes that doesn't prevent a stroke is an app that doesn't work, right? Even though the top surgeon worked on it. But jokes aside, I think that I would like to highlight what Gemma said, which is something I truly believe in, is that although technology is uber amazing, super cool, and can really change the social landscape of countries, there is always a switch from 0 to 1, which is onboarding, and which is letting these people know that they can use technology and technology works like this, which is centered around education. So I would say definitely education is probably the first step.
Education and then teaching also in the education to think in a certain way that you also understand the technology and become more aware how to think and how to adapt on these platforms. Okay, but right now we're talking about in a more broad sense. And of course, we understand there's like many dangers. There's lack of understanding of the user. There's often lack of infrastructure and lots of other things. But can any of you, can any of you name or describe a couple of the cool things that have been done where technology has played a role? Yeah. All the hands popped up. I didn't see the sequence. So Gemma, I'm going to give it to you because you didn't get the word last time. And everyone has their hand raised. Yeah, go ahead.
Which is good. It means that there's lots of successes to share. I was going to use blockchain as a great example. So the UN now is using blockchain to help refugees and displaced people with their documentation. So you can imagine that if you had to leave Syria very quickly, the last thing that you're going to be looking for is your birth certificate, your high school graduate certificate. So using blockchain is a really great way to verify people as well as documents. And I've also seen a lot of education facilities using blockchain as a way, again, to verify documents. Because again, having a document that is certified is really important for you to get a job, for you to access education, and for you to access a lot of services. So I think anything with blockchain is really, really exciting.
It is. Tambo.
Yeah, for me, I will use the recent example, which is still actually very vital in promoting access to healthcare, especially during this era of social distancing and COVID-19. So telehealth has played a significant role actually in supporting the healthcare workers and community health workers in reaching out to patients and still continuing to offer either psychological support or even tracing them in terms of adherence. An example would be HIV patients. So initially the community health workers would go to their homes to check whether they are adhering or taking their medication in time, or whether they are attending their clinics as scheduled. But now telehealth technology provided an option for healthcare providers to do this maybe at the comfort of their homes or at the comforts of the health facilities, without necessarily congesting patients at the facility and putting them at a higher risk of maybe contracting the virus.
Mm-hmm. Eero, do you have any I was thinking where also these concrete examples?
Yeah, I was gonna bring out a few. So from the humanitarian sector, for example, there have been quite good advances on crowdsourcing data after disasters hit. So, once the mobile networks are up and running again after an earthquake or a flood, then people can, go and kind of mark the locations which are hit or buildings which are damaged, and this can produce a lot of very useful and important information in a very short time span, and be very useful for the first responders and humanitarian actors on the ground. So these kind of crowdsourcing initiatives, I think this is one very particular example how technology have been used for very important matters. Secondly, one of the examples which hit me is maybe you have heard about the robots for elderly people in Japan, these robots which kind of live at elderly people's homes and then help them against loneliness and dementia treatment and so on. So it's one kind of very striking and fun way of how technology also can help with these social problems like isolation and loneliness. But thinking even broader, then I think this the fact that internet and is something that you can access every part of the world. Then what we have done a lot is help small and medium businesses to for people to earn livelihoods after in conflict contexts. And then this kind of internet access and this it kind of opens this whole world of market that you can make things in Kenya refugee camp, and you can sell them in Europe or whichever part of the world, and it kind of makes the world so much smaller, but also opens these opportunities that you can really reach people from all over.
That's true. Internet opens up a lot of possibilities, that's for sure. Marko, did you have something to add on that, perhaps from the banking side of the things or payment side of the things?
Yeah, absolutely. I have several examples. Probably the disclaimer I wanted to push forward is that I believe that the most impact is attached to sustainable projects. So there is no such thing as humanitarian impact without a business plan behind it. So I believe that, I I have a kind of a privileged point of observation because I'm working with refugees in a developed country like Germany, and I'm working with vulnerable people in sub-Saharan Africa for completely different means. I do tend to believe that at this stage, since that's probably at the core of my skills, the financial revolution can really empower people in both parts of the world. So what I'm doing with my bank is it's mainly allowing people to access credit through education and without the need of being, I would say, financially vetted. So their creditworthiness is assessed in a much more social and community-driven way, and credit is not used for conspicuous consumption, so to speak. It's mainly addressing their financial resilience and allows them to extend their business life cycle, right? So to thrive instead of being stuck in a 24 hours economic cycle. But then this has been said, I think that I see three main types of successful interventions and use of technology for the good of endangered populations. The first one is the one that involves an active cooperation of governments. So we at Techfugees, we helped Syrian refugees in Lebanon to upskill their technical talents in partnership with the Canadian government that was keen enough to issue digital visas to people who were working as freelancers from abroad and then wanted to move to Canada without having to seek for asylum. And I think this is a very good example of international cooperation or whatever, having, let's say, governments with a very open mind. Then you have examples which instead are grassroots, but do not involve the government support. On the contrary, probably they try to, I'll say, fence back government. So there was a crowdsourced news website in Kenya, which was very, very popular, called Hivisaza, and was mainly a U-Report, like the CNN version of U-Report. So the Kenyan version of CNN, where people could, from areas which were not covered or accounted for from traditional media outlets, they could just report news. And then very shortly that became from a, I would say, gossip local news portal, it became a medium, a speaker's corner to point fingers at corruption, bribes, abuse, violence, political intervention, up to the point that they gather probably, I don't know, millions of readers every month and tens of thousands of contributors, which when then were they exposed to retaliation. So obviously the project didn't achieve that sustainability that was meant to. And then you have instead other projects which just rely on very strong visa programs, like one that I've seen and I witnessed in person from a Syrian refugee who had to, actually from a Syrian entrepreneur who decided to relocate in Dubai and then decided to go to the US to improve his career. But then in the process of moving to the US, he was prevented from entering the US because of, let's say, political events bigger than his whatever personal situation. Yeah. So he found, fast forward, he found himself seeking asylum in Germany as a refugee, although he was a theoretically well-off entrepreneur. Anyway, out of a camp outside of Berlin, he decided to continue being an entrepreneur, built his hardware tech company, which is a mobile manufacturer that does the first carbon fiber mobile, and now is like very prominent as a global success. So I would say those are the three areas that I see. Technology which is completely decluttered from government, technology that goes against government, and technology that goes hand in hand with government intervention. I don't have an answer which is the best one, though.
it's always cool to see these like cool governments coming up with new things like the Canada example that you brought. Joshua, you wanted to elaborate on that one.
Oh yeah, actually, in regards to that, I've seen an emerging trend in SMEs in Kenya, especially SMEs from the informal settlements like Kibra, where I live. I saw a quick revolution on digitizing these businesses using basic tools such as WhatsApp and Facebook. So these women in the food value chain would, they would go to the bigger markets in Nairobi, which were technically closed down during the high peak of the pandemic. And they would have the suppliers, using WhatsApp to communicate to them directly in regards to the products they have, and they would send the riders to pick the food, maybe tomatoes or vegetables in bulk, bring them to their neighborhood, and they would pay the farmers who brings them to the major markets using M-Pesa, which is a mobile money transfer. And then from their homes, they would now portion these vegetables and onions and tomatoes in small bunches and still post them on their WhatsApp status. And their clients would order for the vegetables and it would be delivered to their homes using motorbike riders. Without them leaving their homes, they made money and they digitized their businesses so fast to catch up with the emerging trends.
So it doesn't always have to be like a fancy technology. Sometimes like the WhatsApp,
right.
M-Pesa, and all these simple things combined together, and boom, you have digitalized your business. So it's pretty cool how people are creative like that. I really like it. But Joshua, because we are already on you, I don't know, perhaps, that question actually goes to everybody. How do you think we can empower the vulnerable groups to kind of be more not be more creative, but just to do this like a boosting from inside the community, to have more businesses coming from the vulnerable groups themselves, and sort of like how do we empower them to boost themselves, to give themselves a lift?
All right, I will
and
just
I think
echo...
you're a great example, right? Just the basic concept of what do you do?
Yeah, at Kshoes, we invest in social entrepreneurships. We invest in businesses around early childhood education, around food security and digital divide. And what we embed in our classes would bring together inspiring entrepreneurs and build their business acumen, but also give them digital skills at the basic level. But to jump on your question, I would say I would still echo Marco and Eero in regards to the infrastructure. Even if we do set up a fully fledged infrastructure, then we still have the big question of the skills gap. Now, how do we onboard them? And how do we close those skills? We have a fully fledged resource center with functional computers, but we have no manpower to really leverage those computers to access digital tools. So for me, it would be combining both ICT infrastructure with skills gap, which is very intentional, and involving all the key stakeholders in onboarding the digitally illiterate into the ecosystem of ICT.
So again, circling back to education and ICT, Gemma?
Yeah, and I think just building on what Joshua was saying there, I mean, obviously what we do at InHive and what we feel very passionate about is networks, because you can't have all of these things happening without other people, right? And networks are essentially people and relationships. So, if you are a woman, as we heard from Joshua's story there, who has produce to sell, you need a network to tap in for somebody to deliver, and you need someone to buy your goods. If you have, as I'm sure your hackathon participants today have a really great idea, you might need to tap into a network to find someone who can build that for you, who can market it, who can put funding in for it. So I think it's really important that these vulnerable people have access to these networks, because without that, you can't have these, you know, human-centered design solutions if you haven't got these people within your networks. So I really think it is about trying to get everybody at that table. And with technology, you can really expand your network. I mean, LinkedIn is obviously a really great example of that, but thinking outside of the box about how do we connect these people, build those relationships, share skills, and be able to scale these solutions.
Mm-hmm. So on top of the ICT and education is like this facilitation of creation of the networks and giving like different platforms that enable this this sort of like a network. I think everyone's hands popped up. Eero.
I wanted to add, I do agree with what was said already, a few things to add. And there's this really good principle that I sign to every time, which is the nothing about me without me, which is so often forgotten, that especially when it comes to vulnerable groups, then they very often, many of these groups need to be proactively included in this planning and design phases. It's not just, you know, they didn't say anything, okay, now we'll move ahead with our idea. So when we are designing something for, you know, displaced people or for elderly or for any patients with, you know, people with disabilities, then we need to proactively think about inclusion. It's not just, you know, something that, okay, we made one focus group. It's usually not enough. And secondly, it's echo what was said already, that it's not just about ideas, but we also need to kind of nurture these ideas which come from the communities themselves. And very often vulnerable populations, they different types of vulnerable populations, of course, but oftentimes they don't have good access to financial resources. So this is something that we need to kind of provide and nurture and see that they themselves can lift and boost, you know, their communities from building this resilience from within. It's not something that we from outside can give. So you know, what we have done together with Garage 48 as well in Ukraine, for example, is to have women's entrepreneurship programs for many women across, you know, the eastern Ukrainian area to help them nurture their own ideas, give them, you know, the resources, not only the financial, but also the skills and kind of the thinking around, you know, how to build a successful business and how to thrive.
That's actually like a really cool example. I didn't even think about it, but that's like a great example on how do you even boost that creativity from inside the groups, like that particular Eastern Ukraine one that you mentioned. Because in the beginning, I think also, or just like in the beginning, it was a project of, I don't know, how many teams did we have there? And now it has grown also due to the online, it has grown very, very big, right? It has grown a lot in numbers. I don't remember the exact numbers, but what's being done now in the following year, it has grown a lot. And it is about teaching them, having them engaged, having them involved, keeping, you know, following their progress, and also giving them the small funds to go on doing what they learn to do. Brian, you have their hands still raised, yeah?
Yes. I agree with everything that was said. It just resonates with me, you know, most of what was said, because it's like our experience, at Techfugees Nigeria, because when we started out in 2019, Techfugees Nigeria, how do we help these displaced people with technology? We go to the camps, no basic education, no access to devices, Okay, the only thing we found was, okay, some NGOs, religious organizations have trained them in some craft skills, they can make stuff, they can create stuff, but so many of those organizations afterwards, after the initial training, maybe a little empowerment, they don't follow up with them. So when they try out these things for a week or two, and then there's no patronage, there's no way they can sell their stuff, they tend to abandon it and just focus on something else because they have to eat. And the way it is, the people from within the camps, they don't have enough purchasing power to buy stuff that is not essential. You get what I mean? They will spend their money first on food before they can think of maybe buying like a pair of shoes somebody made from within the camp. And then the ordinary person would not want to go shopping and try to stop first at an IDP camp or a displaced person's camp, so to speak. So that made it a bit difficult for us. And then when we realized, okay, since they can create stuff, and then they are complaining that nobody buys, so the access to market, right? Let's see how we can do that. We had a workshop last year in the heat of the pandemic, and then the lockdown, because the pandemic is still here. So yeah, and we were able to get Shopify to even provide us with an online store. And, while we were developing that, we realized that the standards of some of the things they are making, it was just a lot. So we now had to partner with some organization who was into training them, to upskill them, especially those ones that create stuff, sewing, with sewing and some other little craft work. Now, those people, at the point where we are now is, right, you've learned how to do this thing. So you get on with these people, they train you to a point where you can now make stuff, whatever you're choosing to be making, to some standard, right? Then you can graduate from their own training. When you graduate from their own training, we will now train you. That's Techfugees Nigeria will now train you on using these basic technologies. It was just mentioned, WhatsApp, Facebook, to first of all be able to show yourself, right? But we still have the online marketplace, which we are developing, provided for free by Shopify, to support us. It's called displacedmarkets.com. The end game is for us to have these displaced people be able to run that platform for themselves by themselves.
Yeah.
But that's a big
So in that sense, it
so while we
again
are
taps in like also to this having one network and building also like a network type of a thing, right? And having them to own it. Yeah, own it and run it, right? It is a complicated and long process, I think, for majority of the initiatives. If you want to do it properly, like from the ground up. Marko, did you want to add on that topic as well, or shall we?
Not particularly. I just wanted to throw something for the round that we discussed how and what needs to be digitized in order for tech-driven solutions being impactful. And I think one thing that is worth mentioning is that when you help vulnerable population, you need to factor in trust, which is a huge bond both for adoption and for scaling of any kind of solution. Right? It's not just including from the beginning the end user in the creative process. It's also using technology to make trust transparent and extensible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that blockchain goes, going back to what Gemma was saying, blockchain, it's a great technology to accomplish this endeavor.
Mm-hmm. So at the moment we are almost about at the closing, and because there's 5 of us, I would still like for everyone to be able to have like this last word. And still, because on the background there's happening a hackathon, and it sounds bad when I say it, but the vulnerable populations is one of the most popular topics this year around. It wasn't last year, it was very, very different last year, but this year around it is a popular topic. There is a lot of teams. You have already given quite a lot of insight and shared your thoughts during this panel here. But if you want to say one more thing to those who are at the moment working on their prototype, working on their solution that is supposed to help a certain vulnerable group and their like certain needs, what would you like to say to them as a word of advice? So just let's just do the round. Gemma, yeah.
Yeah, and this is quite topical because we've had one of our members from Techfugees actually came back from Kakuma camp very recently and had seen another project that was being implemented and not very well. So I would really point out feasibility. Obviously, you know, in an ideal world, you would do your feasibility study on the ground. But this particular project was an app for a phone that most people in the refugee camp do not have. They do have feature phones. Those feature phones don't have a lot of memory. Remember the days where you had to delete a message to receive another one? A lot of people, especially women, are illiterate. So they couldn't even read the phone numbers to put in. So you're rolling out a program online for refugee women, and not a lot of them would be able to access it and use it. Electricity, Wi-Fi, what type of device, and most importantly, I think the power structure. So, you know, who's been involved in designing this, who's putting money behind it. All of these things add up, right? Because this product is supposed to be for vulnerable people. So putting them always at the center of your design. And a great example what we have at Techfugees Kenya is we created an e-health watch app, very simple, can be used from a feature phone, which Kenya Red Cross now uses, where refugees can alert the Red Cross if there's any breakouts of illness. So obviously when COVID came in, this was very, very useful. And all it is they just send a numbered message where they are and the Red Cross will receive it. So simplicity and feasibility.
Very good. Anyone else? Eero, Marco? Word, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go, Eero.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gemma took it together very nicely already. So the same checklist that I talked about earlier, you know, make sure there's a need, so the feasibility study, make sure there's, you know, people do have access to it, both in terms of devices and the infrastructure, you know, the internet access, and you know, make sure they have the skills to use it and you know, the capability to actually use it. So I think world has millions of apps. Make sure that they need another one.
Marco, sorry.
I'm gonna go by Ranko from today on. I like it better than Marco. No. I think it got everything got covered. I would just say if they think big, they shall be very lean. Build something that solves one problem, and make sure that everything that revolves around data protection is put at the very core of the project.
So Tambo.
To add on, I would say there's a lot of opportunities around social protection, access to information, and response to emergency response, maybe to the pandemic, and issues around self-registration. So there could be lots of, you know, solutions around those areas, and that would be huge in addressing social problems facing vulnerable population.
Very good angle. And then lastly, Brian.
Yes, I think Gemma probably covered what I want to say, but I just want to put it this way that whatever it is, because in developing solutions for these vulnerable set, I like to call them sometimes marginalized. There's you need to be prepared for surprises. You know, a lot of things can come up from along the way while you're building. So it's important to build with them. You know, you need to find a number of them or one person, depending on whatever you're doing, who is actually a part of that set of people that you would bring along with your development, you know, so to speak.
I think you would all be absolutely amazing hackathon mentors. And these are actually very good words of advice to all the hackathon participants. Thank you so much on behalf of Courage 48, everyone here in the studio, for joining us tonight. We will post and share this particular panel also with our hack participants and have them listen to it. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, and good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.